Hi, welcome back to another episode of Career Reshaped. Our guest today is a familiar face from last season. Zvi has been a recruiter and working with global technology companies expanding in Asia Pacific for almost 20 years. Hey, it's Natasha.
And I'm Pauline.
We're so pumped to bring you even bigger and better stuff this season 2 of Career Reshaped.
We've got new guests, free masterclasses, and all the good vibes you'll only find here.
So don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us on Spotify at Career Reshaped,
and check us out on Instagram at my.career.angels.
Hi, it's Zvi. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hi.
So last time we had you on, we dove deep into your career and how SHIBA is redefining tech recruitment in the APAC region. But for those who missed it, can you give us a quick refresher on your path and what SHIBA is all about?
Sure. So I've been a recruiter in the technology space, working with software vendors in Asia Pacific for almost 20 years. Started out focusing mainly on sales roles and have progressed up into all different roles for go-to-market teams, including sales, executive, leadership, as well as delivery and technical teams as well. Mainly focus on Australia, Singapore, and Japan.
So what we promised our listeners last time was that we were going to bring you back on with your recruiter cap on, not your career history yet. Good, I'm glad it's on. So in our previous conversation, we talked about leadership, scale-ups, and the nuances of hiring in SaaS and cybersecurity. What's changed in your world or the hiring landscape since we last spoke?
Not much has changed in my world, to be honest. It's as difficult as ever to find the right people and the right staff. And I guess I have a lot of conversations with companies that are focused around strategy and how to attract the best people. And because I'm a lot more client driven, I'm a lot more on the client side in terms of headhunting and searching for people for my clients. So yeah, the conversations are still very much about how do I get the best talent, how do I attract the best talent, and how do I retain the best talent.
So speaking of talent, you've obviously seen thousands of resumes. When you open one up, what are you actually scanning for in, say, the first 10 seconds?
In simple terms, it's the fit, right? Having worked in my industry now for such a long period of time, I do know who the players are and who the different companies are that are relevant to the client and the job that I'm recruiting for. So first and foremost, have they worked for competitor businesses? Have they worked for relevant businesses? Secondly is tenure. So the first is, can they do the job? Second is, how well and for how long have they done and can they do the job?
So LinkedIn has become a career essential for many, many industries. What do you see or what do you believe is the number one mistake candidates make on their profiles that could cost them their opportunities?
Lack of information, lack of data. Is pretty straightforward. So the less information you have on your LinkedIn profile, the harder it is to find you. So to give you context, if somebody has only listed where they've worked and how long they've worked there for and what their job title was or is, that's probably the bare minimum of what a LinkedIn profile looks like, and it's got no data. But the reality is that all recruiters are on LinkedIn, and we're not looking for just the company name and the title that person might be working for, because titles can be sometimes a bit ambiguous, especially in certain regions where, in Australia, for example, a regional sales manager or a sales director could be a BDM, whereas and an account executive type salesperson. Whereas in, for example, parts of Asia, I've had people called business development directors that are, appointment setters. So it's a difficult one in that respect. So not having information like markets you've sold to, this is specifically for a sales role though, but markets you've sold to, geographies you've sold to, whether it's Australia, northern region, southern region, if it's Singapore, was it ASEAN, is it Asia Pacific, is it Japan, is it just Singapore, and those sorts of things help you get found by people who are looking for your skill set, as compared to someone who's just looking for an account executive in Singapore. That's going to be a lot harder to find. You're going to be a needle in that haystack as compared to, the flag atop the mountain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fair. So when you then put in your search parameters, would you put those specific things into your search instead of just that broad umbrella?
It's both, right? There's no such thing as a single search for a role when you're a headhunter. What you're looking for, you'll do a couple of searches in a couple of different ways, right? Because you want to cover as much ground as you can. First and foremost, as a recruiter with a recruiter license on LinkedIn, I can write down my list of all of the competitor businesses that I can think of, assuming that the person that you're referring to works for one of those businesses. They'll get found. But they might be working for a startup. They may be working for a large business within. So if you think about the large businesses in the IT space being SAP, Oracle, IBM, et cetera, those businesses have divisions that sell certain products, whether it's marketing software, cybersecurity, data analytics software, what have you. So if that person hasn't identified that they're a data and AI salesperson working at Salesforce or Google, then they're gonna get lost. They're gonna fall through the cracks. So yeah, we'll do a company search, but then we'll also do a role search, and we'll do a keyword search, and a combination of all the above.
Amazing. So it's about being as specific and detailed as possible. Do you feel that the same needs to be said in a resume, or can a resume be a little bit more broad?
Again, it's so. To what you're saying, it's probably the opposite. It's less about being more specific and more being about more general. So you want as many keywords. You got to think about who's searching for you and what keywords are they going to be using, and what information are they going to be looking for in what gets them to find you. So in a resume, I'm a believer personally that 3, maximum 4 pages for a resume is about as much as you need nowadays. But again, in the resume, there's some very important fundamentals that need to be in there. I have some clients that simply will reject a candidate based on their CV, regardless of the fact as to whether or not I've said this person's amazing, I know the person, I know they're right for the role, and I've built the credibility with the client. And I've got some clients that will interview my candidates without a CV. They'll just say, okay, if you think they're good, I'll meet them, and then it goes from there. But I also have clients that are will simply reject somebody off the basis of their CV if it doesn't have key accomplishments, achievements. Again, looking at a salesperson as the theme here, what sales target does that person work towards? What percentage of their sales target did they achieve? What are the key customers that they've brought in the door that are new logos, or if they're an account executive, if they're an account manager, what was the retention and growth targets that they were able to achieve, and the key customers that they dealt with. If you can't put that sort of information in there, then you're not giving the person viewing that enough to work off. But also at the same time, the keywords are just as important, because just like on LinkedIn, where recruiters are searching based on keywords and those sorts of things, when you apply to a job, typically you're going to be automatically put into an applicant tracking system, an ATS, within a company's database, if you like, of candidates. And so they're usually searchable. So even if you apply for a role today, you want your CV to be found tomorrow when they're looking for that role, a different role, or you may not be perfect for the role you're applying for, but then next week you are perfect for a role that you haven't applied for, and you want them to be able to find you.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this topic,
we just wanted to check in and say that if you believe that you need some assistance and that we could help you, reach out to us today, check out our website, join our newsletter. We'd love to be in touch.
we wanted to quickly mention that subscribing to the podcast is the best way to support the show and ensure you never miss an episode. It's super easy. Just click the subscribe button whenever you're listening. Thanks for tuning in. So in terms of those keywords, how does one go about identifying what would be the right keywords? Because from what I understand, you look at the job ad and the job ad itself will tell you exactly who they're looking for, and you're going to use those words. You're going to pull those words from the ad. But now you're saying, look ahead, look a little bit to the future. So how do you target that job ad specifically, whilst at the same time ensuring that tomorrow there might still be an opportunity for you because of your resume?
Well, like I said, it's relevant to the job that you're applying for. In my world, you can sort of put it down to three main silos that I work across, right? So I can speak to myself, one being executive and leadership. So in that, again, it's going to be, what did you achieve? It was always about achievements, accomplishments, and skills, right? They're the three main areas, right? So what did I achieve or accomplish? For a salesperson, overachieving target, what was your sales target? All the things that I mentioned there. If it's a consultant or an implementation person, what were the implementation timelines? How long were they? How many did you manage at any given time? What were the size of the implementations? Did you have profit loss responsibilities? All of those different factors, because there's going to be different roles which require different things. So if you put those things in there in terms of what made you successful at your job and what were the key highlights, then that's going to get you found. And then obviously for technical roles, that's where you're going to have to put in, if you're a developer or, a programmer, what languages do you know? What languages do you use? Even if you're working on 5 different projects, each project should list what was the technology stack? What did you use? What did you program with? What did you deliver with? Etc., etc. So the more information in that respect that you can put, the better, because for a technical person, if you're a .NET developer, you need to have .NET. You've got to have all the different technology stacks that you've worked with, so that when I, as a recruiter, whether external or internal, go to my database and I look for .NET and developer, you come up.
In saying all of that, I have a question following on from having all that information. Is there a time when you could be overly polished? So have a bit too much information where it starts to become maybe not trustworthy. Like you say you can do all of these things, and then does testing need to come into play, or are there certain questions you're going to ask to really verify that?
Good question. So there is sometimes. So some of my clients have technical screening that they do as a part of their interview process. But on one hand, it also depends on the formatting of the CV, right? So if you've looking at technical roles, right? If you've been in a company, let's say for 4 years, and you've worked across 20 projects, if you put 20 projects and all the stuff that you've done, that's going to be 4 pages on its own, right? Because you're going to have all the different technology stacks, all the different timelines, all the different outcomes, and so on and so forth. It's going to be a bit of an overkill, right? So summarizing, it's also important, but at the same time, for technical people, I would recommend having a skills matrix, right? Of here's all the different technology stacks I've used and the amount of years experience. And then if you want to outline the top 5 projects that you've worked on and the technologies used in those projects, then that really gives a really good snapshot. So if you find that you've got too much information, you need to condense it down into snapshots to not create too long. Nobody wants to read a 6, 7, 8, 9 page CV, right? And also if you've had a really long career and you've had a lot of experience over that time in different companies, there comes a cutoff point where the information becomes irrelevant. So, if you were an accountant 15 years ago and now you're selling accounting software for the last 10 years, you don't need to give me the companies you worked with as an accountant in the CV. What's relevant is your accounting software experience. So, cutting it off after, roughly 10, max 15 years is probably also worth considering as well, because you lose relevance, and especially in the IT or the software game that I play, the technology you worked with 10 years ago is largely obsolete now. So, you've got to factor that in as well.
So what advice would you give for somebody who wants to go back? So let's just say we'll take this accountant as an example. They were an accountant 15 years ago. They now selling the accounting software, but they missed it. They want to become an accountant again. And now they're applying for accounting roles, but that experience was 15 years ago. And what we find is a lot of our clients are in that similar position. How then would you recommend the resume to be structured? Do you recommend breaking it up, saying relevant skills and other skills, relevant experience, other experience? How best to present that?
So if you're looking to return to a previous speciality, I would personally recommend having a very clear highlight around updated certifications. So for example, for an accountant, whether they've gone back and got their CA, CPA, or had it updated and recently updated, just showing some sort of indication that their skill set is still there, and also maybe at least a paragraph at the start of the CV, not quite a cover letter, but at least a paragraph outlining why you're looking to go back to that previous type of environment. So, I see that a lot with mums returning to work after a hiatus of a number of years to have kids and what have you. And some of them want to go back to what they were doing before. Some of them want to go somewhere new. Some of them just want that first opportunity, or might be looking for something 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week, whatever the reasons were. And context helps. So, the first page is always going to be that snapshot. So if you can have the first paragraph highlighting relevance, story, and objective, that's always going to be useful as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I want to jump back quickly to the skills matrix that you mentioned, because I have a feeling that will bring up some questions in regards to, one, are you explaining that as a table? So I know a lot of people have a fear of tables on their resumes because they believe it will not pass the ATS. What do you say to that?
It's not been a problem for me historically. I've not seen that be an issue. I'm not sure about that. That sounds like it's more of a formatting consideration. So, I stick to Excel and Word, copy paste. Within Word itself, you can create a table. You don't have to copy paste an Excel table. You can create a table inside the Word document as a Word function. And I think if you do that, you shouldn't have a problem. Equally so, if you're saving your resume as a PDF, some ATSs will pick it up, some won't. It's not something that is going to have a blanket thing. Just whatever you do, don't save your CV as an image. If you save it as an image, if you're a design person and you're a media person and, that's a fundamental part of your CV, great, in how you present it, and I can understand that. Just don't do it because it won't get picked up. ATSs do not pick up images. They will pick up PDFs, but they won't pick up images.